So working with gangs north, patrol was kind of busy. So the guy I was with says, "Hey, Boris, let's take this call. Got a domestic." Okay. So there's this little, try not to drop too many F-bombs, but a little mousy guy and this little teeny tiny girl, and he was wailing on her, and he said something that was kind of like, Niagara Falls. So, so I cuffed him, take your best shot. So he goes around, bam, tagged him, bounced him off the wall a couple of times, and he's still mother. I'm like, hey, dude, man, you have a death wish or what? So I get on the balcony, I says, we're 3 floors up. I said, mother, it's a long way down.
Boris, thank you for being here today. By way of an introduction, I wanted to provide a brief overview of your law enforcement career. Your law enforcement career began in 1983 as a Border Patrol agent with the Immigration and Naturalization Service. From 1983 to 1987, you were assigned to the San Clemente station, Chula Vista Sector. In addition to performing border security functions, you served as the sector Serbo-Croatian interpreter, and at one point, you were tasked to the Chicago District Office to assist in a human trafficking investigation involving Yugoslavian nationals. In 1987, you were assigned to the Detroit, Michigan station, where you assisted with border security and criminal investigations. In 1988, you were promoted to Senior Special Agent and assigned to the Immigration and Naturalization Service Office of Investigations in Chicago. Your primary responsibilities at that time included gangs and narcotics. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 consolidated several federal agencies in an effort to enhance national security. The Immigration and Naturalization Service was one of those agencies, and in 2003 you were assigned to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Office of Investigations in Chicago, where you worked in various areas within the Office of Investigations, to include the Financial Unit, Compliance Enforcement Unit, and the Public Safety Unit. You worked extensively with specialized law enforcement units to include the FBI Foreign Fugitive Squad, Violent Crimes, the Chicago Police Department, Gang and Financial Investigations, the Illinois State Police, Gang and Narcotics Unit, and the Cook County Sheriff's Police, Gang Unit. You retired from ICE in 2008. Boris, thank you for agreeing to share your story.
You're welcome.
So, what attracted you to law enforcement?
Growing up in the 60s and the Mercury astronauts, every kid wanted to be an astronaut. Well, then, the jet age, every kid wanted to be a pilot. So once I got past the astronaut and the pilot stage, I decided, I want to be a cop. Part of it seeing the beat cop in the old neighborhood, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. It was part of it was respect, and I got to admit the leather jacket looked cool.
So why did you choose Border Patrol? Was that a conscious decision on your part?
Initially, no. Chicago. That was, I have to admit, it was my one and only, focus. And took the test a couple times, scored very, very well. I thought, man, I'm in. Waiting. People getting called for the assessment center. I'm like, okay, my call's right around the corner, if you will. And we were sitting around, shooting the shit with a friend of mine. And he goes, hey, here, Boris, you like this kind of stuff. And he showed me an ad in the paper, and it was like careers with the U.S. Border Patrol. Okay, I'm thinking, I'm, waiting for Chicago. I thought, what the hell? Looked into it, and one thing led to another. I put in the application, took the test, thinking, they'll never call me. And fast forward a year and a half, 2 years, I get this mailgram saying, you've been selected for the position of a Border Patrol agent, detailed Chula Vista Sector, San Clemente Station. Oh, crap, what do I do now? Do I do this or do I wait? So I thought, well, better a sure thing than a maybe. So I thought, well, I'll take it. And at some point, if they call me, I'll politely say, hey, I got to go. So I took the job, packed up, moved to California, did all the paperwork, sworn in, got sent to the academy, and the rest is history.
This episode is brought to you by the 555 Group.
Looking for top-tier security solutions backed by real experience? The 555 Group, founded by seasoned law enforcement professionals, delivers elite security services tailored to your needs. With expertise in risk assessment, executive protection, and site security, they provide unmatched professionalism and reliability. Whether safeguarding businesses, events, or individuals, the 555 Group ensures safety with precision and integrity. Trust the experts. Trust the 555 Group.
So talk about the academy a little bit. You moved to California, but where was the academy at, and how long was that?
The academy, after got out of the academy, drove back to Chicago and then moved to California to my assigned station. That was in Glencoe, Georgia, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, FLETC, in Brunswick, Georgia, or near Brunswick, Georgia. That was 23 weeks of hell.
Wow.
Hell. I think, had I known what, the physical part of it was not an issue. I mean, I was in shape, I ran, so, but just a combination of that, the stress, and it was hell.
So was it just Border Patrol guys in your class, or was it all federal agents?
Well, we had, they had different buildings at the time. We shared a building with DEA. They were up on the top floor. And I think at some point later, they moved to Quantico. But comparatively, most other agencies, when they got there and they had these little blue, they were bopping around the base and, kind of like going from class to class, not a care in the world. With us, it was like absolutely, it was worse than basic training. I mean, if there were two or more, you had to march, but you had to walk in step, like a formation. God forbid if an instructor caught you, bopping, 2, 3, 4, whatever in a group and not, in ranks inspections Monday morning. Shoes had to be polished. Brass had to be, shined. It was like, like being in the Army again. PT, infinitely worse than basic. I mean, they literally put us through the ringer. The only other people I felt sorry for were the marshals. What they did is they rotated. In the morning, you take PT, in the afternoon class, and at some point it was reversed. And we would always follow the marshals in the gym, and they came looking out just as bad as we did when we were done. So I thought, you poor suckers, man. But no, it was a rough academy. I learned a lot. It was fast paced. The Spanish was absolutely. We thought, there's no way in hell. I mean, when we first got there, the first day we sat down and, we're like, oh, crap, what did I get myself into? Guys walking around with, smoking their bare hats, dress uniforms that, look like God. I know it's blasphemy, borders on blasphemy, but, to a young kid, I thought, and, by the time it was like, we had at the time, the largest class was 52 of us. Yes. By the time that they're reading us the Riot Act, and by the time you're done here, every single book on that table, you will have read every single page. And we're like, oh, my God. And which was, BS. But one guy got up and left.
Oh, wow. I
mean, he was like, and it was to say, hey, just let us know whenever you want, so we'll get you on a plane. 2 hours later, boom, you're at the airport on the way home. No, no muss, no fuss. But it was... the academic part of it. Spanish was, when I spoke, if you can call it speaking, Spanglish, most like, sounded more like a gangbanger than anything else. But, I had some knowledge of the Spanish language growing up where I did. And so it was a little easier. They didn't put me with the natives, but I was like 1 or 2 steps down with people that had, and we went from, week one, pronouncing, rather day one, week one, pronouncing, the alphabet to, by day 5, diagramming sentences. So it was I mean, you couldn't, if you missed a day, you were lost. I mean, you were lost. I mean, it was whoever designed it. In retrospect, I mean, whoever designed it did an excellent job, and it was, they knew what they were doing. You think, there's no way in hell, but somehow we managed.
Wow, that's incredible.
So
that's incredible.
Firearms was great. Love that. At some point, law was, and I had a regular routine. It was, you talk about the ultimate focus. I mean, Monday through Thursday, every night, 8 hours, 4 hours Spanish, 4 hours law. Boom. Friday and Saturday, was off day. Sunday morning, all day, out by the pool, law books, Spanish books. I mean, they had this whole warning of rights, and you had to memorize verbatim in Spanish. And for me, it was a stress. But there was good old boys from Texas, man. They could barely speak English, much less Spanish. And it was for as bad as it was for me. It had been a killer for them. But good portion. We started out with 52 people. We graduated at 34.
Wow.
And that was just the academy. I think we lost another. There was a post-academy, you're basically probationary the first year, but you had a 6-month review and a 10-month review where you had to go in front of a board. You took a written test, you go in front of a board, and they would ask you questions, law, this and that, and they would talk to you in Spanish, ask you a question. And again, it was, if you were a comma off, boom, they ding you. So it was pretty intense. I think we lost another 8 or 9 between 6 month and 10 month. So somehow or another, by perseverance and the grace of God, here I am.
So you graduate the academy and you show up at Chula Vista. So what's that like? Do you remember your first day, your first week on the job?
First week on the job, actually first night was I thought, oh, this is going to be good. You get in and it's like, oh God, here, see what this guy's at. It's kind of like the calm before the storm, if you will. They said, okay, they went out on a checkpoint and showed, basically showed me checkpoint operations, how to do vehicle inspections, and kind of watch for it a little bit. It's okay, you jump in a rotation. So, car comes out, you do your, good evening, what country are you, et cetera, et cetera. Do your whole routine. And then this car pulls up, 2 girls in a Mercedes convertible. I thought, okay. Evening, girls, how you all doing? This is, what country are you citizens? Oh, United States. Now, one of the drivers like, would you like to see some breasts? I heard her, and it didn't, I heard her, but it didn't register. And I'm like, and after about a second or two, it was, well, yeah. And she smiles, waves, and, drives up the road. I'm like, what the hell just happened? And they were laughing, and I found out later it's like a regular, semi-regular, says, 12 o'clock, primary on checkpoint, girls would come up, same routine. So they thought, okay, give the trainee, a shock, if you will. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fun, But far from, it wasn't quite that exciting. But no, that was my first. That was my introduction.
Sure.
And I thought, oh man, this is going to be good, and it was, but not how I thought.
So do you remember your training program? Was it very formal and structured, or was it more like, hey, you're going to be with this guy for a month and he'll kind of show you the ropes?
It was semi-structured. They sort of assigned you to a senior agent and kind of had him show you the ropes. You kind of rode with him. They had C&E's conduct and efficiency reports they would do on you periodically. Okay. We rotated every 28 days. So, you started on midnights, and, which was hell. And, but the patrol had to do it different. Instead of rotating forward, they rotated backwards. Mm-hmm. Go figure. It should be the running joke. This is, at the time, Border Patrol, 75 years unhampered by progress. The patrol did things a little different. they always put you with a senior agent.
Okay.
So you didn't always have the same person, but generally, they rotated crews once a year. So they'd jumble everybody up and assign a group to such and such supervisor, and so every year you would, so I don't know what the reasoning was behind that, but anyway, that was the protocol.
Okay.
So yes, in a way, they did assign you to an agent, but it wasn't the same person.
So the Chula Vista Station sector?
Chula Vista Sector, at some point they renamed it San Diego Sector. I don't know why. The old timers, myself included, still refer to it as Chula Vista Sector.
Okay.
That was kind of.
So how is that staffed? And how is it broken up? You talked about how there's kind of patrol guys. How many people are there, and how is it organized?
We had probably 12 to 14 agents per shift.
Okay.
Ideally, a little more, a little less. You had one supervisory border patrol agent per crew per shift. You had one assistant patrol agent in charge and one patrol agent in charge of the station. And that was kind of like the command structure. And then in sector, down at Chula Vista, you had, chiefs, assistant chiefs, and, they tried to stay out of that as much as we could.
So you're at Chula Vista, you complete your training, and then you're put on your own. When you go on your own, does your job change at all, or are you still doing vehicle checks? Do you get more responsibility? What happens when?
Well, usually after, when you're a trainee for the first year, they kind of they would never talk to you directly. You'd be standing there, and journeyman agents would be like, have the trainee do this, have the trainee do that. There's a bunch of paperwork, of course. Journeymen are in the lunchroom eating, and we're doing paperwork. So okay, you pay your dues.
Right.
But that was kind of you always you work with a crew. Rarely did you work by yourself. There was always somebody with you, 1, 2, 3, or more, depending on what you were doing. So a lot of that was dependent on operations. What the program was for the day, what you were going to do for the day.
Okay. How old were you when you started with the Border Patrol?
Ooh, I was 28.
Did you enjoy it, or was it tedious?
I enjoyed it. It was tedium. It was, you went from 0 to 60 sometimes in like a half a second. More often than not, you'd be at the checkpoint. The way they did it is you had one guy behind a sign that had stopped U.S. officers, and you had a chase car in secondary. So if you saw a car come up, how you doing? You do your little routine, and you wanted to look at them further. You direct in the secondary, which was basically just pull over to the right. We had a chase car. We called a pie wagon, a step van with all our equipment. Chase car in front of it, and 2 guys standing in secondary. So you direct the vehicle into secondary for further inspection. Well, 9 times out of 10, they'd okay, and they're on their way. Every now and then you get a car pull over, okay, and
wow,
go, 822 chase, we have a failure deal. So secondary would hop in and run after them. Then they'd roll somebody from the office as backup. So you get 2 cars up the road, and depending on how that ended, we chased. I was secondary. I had my training officer with me, so we were in secondary. Sure enough, guy failure deal. We jumped in, and we had a brand new, didn't even have break-in miles, brand new Crown Vic. So we're up the road, hauling butt. I'm like, oh. So somehow or another, the two cars hit. Whether they slowed down or but so it's 2 Crown Vics bumped, and a good amount of damage. But we caught they had a little bit of dope. Some people in the trunk. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was like like an everyday thing. So we get back to the station. I'm thinking, oh, I'm still on probation. And I thought, oh, God, man, my career's over before it started. So I'm like, oh, God, I said, hey, Jim, says, hey, just, write what happened. Don't worry about it, man. It's all good. I'm like, oh, God, And the AP, I say, assistant patrol agent in charge. If you don't if I get lost in acronyms, throw something at me. APIC, Mitch comes up and he goes, I thought, oh my God, here it goes. He goes, how fast were you going? Oh, Chief, Mitch, I got to tell you, man, we were going balls to the wall. Kind of looks at me, looks at my, my training officer, and he goes, price of doing business, write it up. Walks away. That was it. Wow. I thought, wow. And an old patrol, man, it's like, had your back.
Wow.
So, that was my first experience, if you will. I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. Yeah.
So give me an overview, kind of that 30,000-foot perspective of your career with the Border Patrol and then ICE, some of the positions and stations that you worked at, just kind of that overview.
Okay. I stayed since San Clemente for, I'd say, for the sake of argument, about 6 years.
Okay.
At some point, I was, the routine was starting to wear on me. I thought I need to find something a little less dynamic, and put in for a slot. They had an opening in Detroit, and I remember my first line supervisor. He says, "Boris, this is if you're thinking about it, put in for it." And this is, a lot of people they see Detroit, and it's like it's a dump thing. So he says, it's the proverbial diamond in the rough. He says, put in for it. So you have a good chance of getting it. Sure enough, I put in for it. Chief calls me on one day. I thought, okay, crap, what did I do now? And he says, no, Boris, relax. This is Detroit call. Want to know how you. We had this thing called, they had a rating every year. You get so many points,
mm-hmm.
and that determine your place in line for a job that might be available. Well, there was the VAT rating, and then there was the FTS rating, Federal Telecommunications System rating. They'd call the station, hey, how is this guy? Blah blah blah. That weighed more than the paper. So I guess they chief liked me and says, no, I think he'd be an asset. So. Got selected for the job, and lo and behold, about a couple of weeks later, I was on, packed my stuff up, movers came, and I was on my way to Detroit. So I get to Detroit, essentially the same operation, only not checkpoint. It was more of an investigative in nature. We would, a lot more specialized. We didn't do with the volume, but it was a lot more detailed. At the time, crack was, is starting to come up. Like, what's these little,
mm-hmm.
Little white? And he says, well, that's cocaine, but it's, yes, I know what cocaine looks like. He says, no, it's crack, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of found out. So that started coming up, and there was, Detroit had it's like a rolling, kind of like a TAC unit,
mm-hmm.
but, they had no specific district. They were basically citywide, and warrants, we'd roll with them. They'd have a warrant, basically any foreign. And he had not a whole lot of Hispanics, but a lot of strange, not strange, Nigerians, Albanians, anybody but Mexican. And busting through doors, executing search warrants and arrest warrants, finding a bunch of coke, bunch of rock, and kind of helping them out on the foreign national end, detainers and or arresting them, and just the whole the whole process. It wasn't, again, it was, at some point, it was like, I kind of want to go back to San Clemente.
So you hear a lot of talk about, the relationship between ICE nowadays and local law enforcement. What was that relationship back in, is this the late 80s now, early 90s?
Let's see, 86, 87.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot, it was a lot better. At some point, politics was, we're not, wasn't what it was like, what it's like today. A lot more cooperation, a lot more, even, even the tree huggers kind of, all right, you have, we understand you're doing your job, and they weren't totally anti-immigration, so it was a lot. Cooperation was a lot better.
So after Detroit, where do you go?
I saw a vacancy announcement on the board, announcement for an investigator, Chicago District. I'm like, man, sort of kind of wanted to get back home, but it was like a really, real struggle staying in the patrol. I'm absolutely proud of what I've done over, but I have very little, if any, regrets.
Mm-hmm.
But my one regret is I left the patrol. I had to be honest about that. They, a number of reasons, but, wind up in Chicago as an investigator. I had a week or so off, and at the time we had to wear suits. So I thought, oh God, I had jeans. So I'm running around, getting there. So first day, my little briefcase, walk into the office, and here I am. What do I do? Say, hey, there's your desk. Sit down. Give me a couple of files, and it was kind of an easy transition. A lot of the guys in the office at the time were ex-border patrol, and so it was. They understood.
So you said your one regret is when you left patrol. You're talking about when you left Border Patrol, and when you left Border Patrol.
And I went to investigations.
And you went to investigations. Leaving Border Patrol, did that happen when you left Chula Vista, or did that happen when you left Detroit?
Well, when I left Detroit, I was still a Border Patrol agent in Detroit.
Got it.
And, I'm talking in retrospect. I've done some really, I've had the privilege of working with some really talented, people that whatever make me, nothing by comparison. I'm really talented, I learned a lot. I enjoyed what I did. The people I work with, the agencies I work with, I absolutely proud of that. But in all honesty, yeah, I wish I'd stayed in the patrol.
So let's talk about some of the cases you investigated. Are there any cases that stand out in your mind?
There was, let's see. This was, I was in San Clemente, that human trafficking case. Somebody called, I don't know how somebody found out, hey, there's a guy in San Clemente Station that speaks Serbo Croatian. I'm like, what the hell? This is, and Chief PIC rather came up. He says, Boris, I got this call from Sector, blah, blah, blah. They want me. Says, would you have any problems going back to Chicago for a couple of days? Like, no, that'd be okay. And it was a human trafficking, a bunch of Albanians. They were smuggling people in and working on it. Majority of them were fellow Albanians. They were working these restaurants, and Chicago Investigations was running the case. So they says, well, can we use your help as translator or whatever? Like, okay. So that was good. Flew to Chicago. Case was successful. Took everybody down, helped them in filling out, during the translation. Some of them, couldn't speak English. So like they were looking at me like, well, what's this guy, It's like, okay, game's over, man. You can't, But at any rate, I helped them with the case. Lasted about a week. I went back.
Was that your first time being involved in an active investigation to that degree?
For the most part, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. When I got, fast forward, Detroit and Chicago, and there was a couple of old guys, from the crew that was on when I was a young Border Patrol agent that were still in Chicago District, and hey, how you doing? Kind of old times. But that was the first investigation, if you will, kind of like the operation, how they did it, the whole procedures, pretty much everything.
So you get to Chicago, and now that's your primary job. Any investigations in Chicago that were particularly interesting to you or stand out in your memory?
They had, I was in Ganyan for probably a good 7, 8, if not more years. It was, that's where I got to work with, a lot of different PDs, a lot of different agencies, from a gang enforcement perspective. There was, this was later on with ICE, but mostly working with other PDs, doing a collateral investigation on your own pertaining to, our needs. But, God, anything, gangs, drugs, human trafficking, I mean, you name it. They had me spoke Spanish well enough where I can kind of bullshit my way through, and a couple of the other sections used me as an undercover, going in and pretending to be one thing or another, and making buys in Spanish. That'd be kind of hard now. I don't, my fluency's gone to hell, but essentially things like that.
Yeah. Anyone that you'd care to really share some detail with us on?
Actually, a couple. One was kind of concerning. The other one was kind of funny. But anyway, walk in, this guy was a vendor making fraudulent immigration cards. He says, hey, want somebody to go in there and, make a buy. Okay, I'll go. So kind of put on my game face, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Big old, steel door, bam, 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 Hey, hay algo. Come on in, so what, so yeah, what do you, oh yeah, I need a card so I can work, talking in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. What's your name? Tony, I can't remember what name I gave him, says, okay, so, yeah, where are you from? Here, family came over, making small talk. And this big iron door, I thought, oh shit, they cut behind me, clang, click, I'm looking around, trying, hey, going through the, but it, it worked out well, I gave me the card, gave him the money, walked out. Okay, guys, I'm clear. Boom. They wind up taking them down later. So that was my first one. Second one was was a marriage fraud. This some attorney in the city was making a couple $1 million a year doing this. So okay, so this time I was a Yugoslavian immigrant. I mean, to myself, I sounded stupid. I thought, oh man, this is, I'm trying not, in the back of my mind, I'm, going through my little routine, but I'm thinking, man, I sound dumb as shit. But he apparently bought it, man. So the guy hooks me up with this. He says, well, we'll get your wife, and he says, no, mister, but I'm married. Oh yeah, I know, but don't worry about it. So they bring this girl in, a cute little Puerto Rican girl. I'm thinking, this can get interesting. And so this is going to be your wife. She said, come back tomorrow, and we'll wind up going to Skokie Branch Court. And so I come back there tomorrow. The next day, they pull a bait and switch, man. It's like rather rather live. I'm like, hey, what the hell happened to the little, little Puerto Rican girl, man? This isn't fair. So I kind of like, oh, okay, Blanca. So me and Blanca were, got in the car and driving. I'm talking to her. Says, getting it says, I met each. Says, yeah, but you nice, you cute, you nice, I said, okay. So she bought it. We went in there, and they had, the county people had prior information that there was, people were gonna come in. It's gonna be, they let them in on the scenario, and no one took a lunch break, and for county, and that's like, as everyone wanted to be there when the stuff went down. So I'll go through, I had a little pistol in my back pocket just in case, a little 25. So I go through, and they were aware of it. So I go through and then beep, beep, beep. And the guy's like, patted me down and okay, So we go in there, Blanca and I, get married. And it was, they eventually had to, annul, legally annul the marriage.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was legit. I mean,
Wow.
legitimate. We had a license, we got married. I still got the copy somewhere at home. The wife's like, but so we get married, the happy couple, leaves the courtroom. So of course the guys are waiting outside, so the driver and the girl get arrested. They throw me in, against the car and, hey, what these, playing along. So God bless her. I mean, the girl, I felt kind of bad for her. She's, poor girl's like, out of work, paying whatever, so yeah, I really felt sorry for her. And she's like, go easy on him. He doesn't speak English too good. I thought, okay, I must have pulled it off because, and, the guy got, eventually got convicted, lost his license and, so, but those were two that sort of kind of, investigations that stood out.
So when you went in, the first one, when you go in to get the documents and they clang that steel door behind you, your Spanish was that good that they had no idea that
No,
you were pulling a scam on them? Or you were setting them up? Not setting them up, that you were running an investigation.
Yeah, no, it
Wow.
was, I felt confident enough at the time because, I mean, it was like every day. So my, practice, picking up things from, so-and-so, different dialects or different,
Wow.
so like kind of had my game face on.
Sure.
But yeah, it was, was good enough to.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the marriage fraud, you're portraying yourself as being Yugoslavian or Serbian or Croatian?
No, it was just, I saw at some point, I kind of, I'm from, this and this.
Okay.
So
okay.
this Yugoslavian, individual that, needs a wife so he can work kind of thing.
But what's funny is you were less comfortable with that language. You thought you kind of sounded silly.
Yes. It's and kind of and even to this day, I mean, part of it is I don't, growing up with my parents, spoke Croatian. Well, Serbo-Croatian was the official language then under Yugoslavia. Now it's whole new different, so yeah, I was, even today I feel more comfortable. My fluency has kind of gone to shit Spanish-wise, but I feel more comfortable and more fluent speaking Spanish than I do Croatian.
Boy, I think they must have done an incredible job teaching Spanish down there when you first started with the Border Patrol. That's incredible.
It was, it at the time was like, what the hell, but it was, whoever worked on it did a good job. They structured it well. They, it was fast paced. I mean, it's not something you could do on a whim. I'll see what this is about. You had to focus and commit or you were lost. I mean, it was that, but it worked. It worked. It was that, I got to the station, I mean, for what I spoke that much better. And then over the years, just kind of dealing with people every day, you kind of pick it up. And
that's incredible. So you shared with me the one regret that you have. So let's talk about it. Was there ever an investigation, a particular incident that you were on where it didn't quite go the way you wanted it to, and you wished you had the opportunity to do it over again?
Not really. There was, it was for about as instant gratification as those things are going to get. They were, they went well.
Yeah.
There was a long-term investigation I got put on prior to the merger. It was still INS and Customs. Customs had this drug operation, and this is, hey, Boris, go over to Customs. So I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to take, they're going to go bust through a door. So you meet so and so at this place. Here's the address. So, I got my bag. I got my raid gear on. I'm all, I'm ready for bear. The guy sitting in the car looks at me like, "The fuck are you doing?" So, says, "Take that shit off. This is long term." So I sat down in the car and he kind of gave me the program. He says, "Yeah, this is drug and money laundering operation, and et cetera, et cetera." It's okay. Wound up being a year-long investigation, and it's basically every now and then I'd have to make what is drug and money laundering. What they would do is the UC work in the area had contacts. They would call, and you'd get a contract for, okay, you're going to go pick up whatever amount of dollars. First, they'd try to isolate the UC on their end, so UC doesn't get killed. And at some point, do a knock. Hi, can we come in? Of course. And that was, I guess, where my Spanish came in. I kind of developed a knack, and Customs was, at the time, Customs was very appreciative of the fact I developed a knack for convincing people that they should let me search their house. But the first big seizure we did was a place in house in, I can't remember the street, in Melrose Park.
Okay.
And I think we got like 3.2 million out of that.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, and a bunch of, paraphernalia. I mean, nothing, but the cash was the big thing.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what it was. They were doing. It was cases out of I think one of the Florida offices, either Miami or Tampa, and it was brilliant at the time because it had never been done before. I mean, the cartels didn't know what hit them.
Wow.
Did not know what hit them. They were like, and that was, we follow some, watch. The protocol was you watched, the pickup. Taking the money from so-and-so, okay, I got a contract for X amount of dollars, meet so-and-so, okay. So you didn't arrest him, but, you follow the guy to the safe house, and that's where you sat on that. And then once enough time passed, once you're satisfied that, you're not going to burn, your informant, you hit the house. That's where you found the money.
Wow.
So it was kind of like we did that for the better part of the year. And I think all total, probably 200 plus million.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible.
For, total seizures and drugs.
Yeah.
And drugs. We would, and you rarely would find drugs and money in the same. I mean, almost never. Usually currency, which, after, it's funny, after a while, it was whatever, and we catch somebody, it's like, $500,000. This is bullshit. We got to be here all night. We're so used to get spoiled with like tons and tons of cars. The protocol was the count team, the security team, so you have to go through so you'd count the money twice, and it was never the same. And then you go to the bank, they counted, and that was the accepted count. And at some point, and they kind of knew there's going to be just by sheer numbers, you were going to have differences in totals.
Sure.
But if it was like, well, okay, you got the first count's like $2 million. And the second count's $1.5 million. Something's wrong. So, but it was still, the pain in that, at the back of your mind, oh man, so, I mean, no one, they had, the count room, you were in there, there was security guy, even the SAC, I mean, it didn't go in, I mean, nobody got in. So the money was counted, security team took it to the bank, they counted it, gave you your receipt, and boom, then, you can breathe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty wild.
What are some of your fondest memories of the job?
Personally, so working with gangs north, Cook County, and one of these nights where patrol was kind of busy, so the guy I was with says, "Hey, Boris, let's take this call. Got a domestic." Okay. So we get onto this house. You hear noise, bam, 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 so we knock, 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 and no answer, and knock, bang, he let us in. But so there's this little, try not to drop too many F-bombs, but a little mousy guy, and this little teeny tiny girl, and he was wailing on her, and on the floor, on the mattresses on the floor, this dirty, filthy, roach infested. There's this little kid, I mean, infant, laying there. I'm like, oh, it's just, you have to, you can't help but be affected by something like this. I'm like, oh. Say, hey, we had them, calmed them down pretty quick. So, partner went, says, Boris, I'm going to run down to the store like not even half a block away to get something for the kids, pay, whatever. So I said, okay, no problem. I'll pat down the other guy, cuffed him. And everything was good. And he starts, MFing me. I'm like, oh, please don't, This little, it's usually the small guy that knows he's going to get his ass beat. And it's like, big guys like, I always said, dude, man, if you mess with me, I'm going to kill you. This is, and everything was cool, this little scrawny, nothing. He's like, okay, man, yeah, sure, whatever. And he said something. Let's see, statute of limitations and something. I could talk about it. He, I'm like, oh, cut it out, man, dude, got to go back and forth Spanish and English. I said, shut the fuck up. It's just, nah, you think you're a badass, blah, 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 I'm handcuffed here. And he said something that was kind of like, Niagara Falls. So, okay, fucker. So I handcuffed him, take your best shot. So he goes around, bam, tagged him, bounced him off the wall a couple of times. And he's still motherfucking me. I'm like, dude, man, do you have a death wish or what? I said, calm down. He's, again, that little trigger word, I don't know, can't remember what it was. So I get on the balcony, I says, we're 3 floors up. I said, motherfucker, it's a long way down. Says, calm down, cut the bullshit. So I'm like, kind of trying to, say, when he slipped, and he started to slip. So I'm like, oh shit. I grabbed his pants, and he, his head, I had him by the collar and lost my grip. But I had my hand on it. So he like slides down about a half inch. So I get this little scrawny white butt looking at me. I'm like, oh man. So I'm doing this. I finally got, grabbed him by the collar, pulled him back up, brought him in the house. And I kind of read him the riot act. I says, man, if he'd like to beat up his living girlfriend, I will hunt you down. I will, I will find you and I will kill you. You understand? I will fucking kill you. Okay. Cuffed him up. So, partner comes back with food and stuff and, little stuff for the kid. So we're all good. So, okay, Sunshine, he's going to jail. So, And I gave her my phone number. I gave her my card, my phone number. Says, if you ever have any problems, so give me a call any time of day or night. You good? Okay. So Junior, goes with us. We book him. He does his time, comes out, gets deported. And fast forward about, I don't know, about 7, 8 months. We're walking around the summertime. And here's this, this macho stud that used to like to beat on his girlfriend. We see him. He comes around and he sees me, and he turns white. So I didn't even acknowledge him. I says, Sandra, says, mi amor, how you doing? Oh, no, good. He says, oh, no, so how things going? No, they're great. We saw the priest, and he's, and I looked over, and here's this guy that's used to powering, if you will, for want of a better word, over this girl, holding on to her arm for dear life, like, protect me from this guy, he's going to kill me. At that point, I realized, a miracle had taken place. There's this one asshole that will never, ever hit a girl again. And that, in all sincerity, was my personal, I thought, yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
That's awesome.
That's what I'm most proud of.
So he got deported, but came right back?
Yeah, he came back, and we're like, then at that, it was like, now she says, one of the last comments is, Sandra, you still have my card, mi amor, my love.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Says, don't, still never, he's holding on to her arm, and as they're walking away, he's kind of like, he wants to look back, but he doesn't. He's like holding on to her arm, doing this. Is like, is this maniac going to go after me? And says, Jesus, thank you.
Was there anybody on the job that that you look to as a mentor? I know you kind of moved different stations a lot. I don't know if you really had the opportunity to form a bond in that way, but is there anybody who maybe the way they did the job, you were like, that's how I want to do the job?
There's a couple guys at San Clemente that they'll remain nameless. But no, there's a few people that, they. Oh, if I can go back to
Sure.
this, to San Clemente,
Yeah.
I missed something I think was important. I think partially for me personally, and professionally, but kind of had an epiphany of sorts. At some point, I was in Tijuana doing around the holidays, doing shopping, just to pass the, whatever. So I'm walking along the stalls, this little, along the main Revolution Street, Calle Revolucion, and little, there's a man in there, and little stuff. He goes, you're immigration, Spanish. I'm like, oh shit. No, I think I work in a bank, I always thought, no, at the time I wasn't laughing, but I was like, oh shit, man, I'm, yeah, you're, patrullero, patrolman, San Clemente. No, you got me confused with somebody else. I work on that. And I don't know if he was kind of like, I figured, well, this is pop, as I was a runner then. I mean, my academy time for the mile run was 5 minutes, 9 seconds.
Wow.
So,
you were a runner.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I thought, well, if I pop him in the jaw, I can make it to the border and I'll be okay. And he kind of, just laughed and goes, no, I understand. This is, you're doing your job. He says, I understand you're just doing your job, but you treated me with respect. He, stuck his hand out, shook hands. And I go, a little, talk stuff. And he says, well, it's, where's a good restaurant? He goes, right here. I says, what do you mean? He says, my wife's an excellent cook. He says, sit down. So here, in the middle of some market in Tijuana, this Border Patrol agent is talking to this guy, like two human beings.
Yeah.
So it's an epiphany of sorts in that, we shared family stories, how many times, I says, what, Says, you seem like a regular guy. What's that? Nah, I got, you're trying to make trying to make some money, getting up to L.A. And he says, you guys at San Clemente, they make us pay more because of you guys. We took that as, I took that as a left-handed compliment, but more importantly, it was, two human beings talking to each other. I was there probably about an hour and a half,
Wow.
talking one thing or another. Excellent food, man. The wife was a good cook. So, guys sharing his food with me were, and then, very genuine. It's just, I got to get, I got to go. And no, sir, senor, gracias, blah, blah, blah. He says, thank you, man hug, and brother, take care of yourself. I truly wish you the best. And, kind of went on my way. I'm like, changed me in some respect. I mean, I had a sense of, had some, empathy for the people before that. Kind of like, hey, it sounds horribly cliche, but the vast majority of them, majority of the people are good, decent, honest, hardworking. They're trying to survive. They're trying to, earn for their family. And so I always had a sense of that. But, after talking with him, it was kind of, I don't know, it's almost like a religious experience. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it affected me positively in a number of different ways, but kind of don't want to get into that here, but it had a big effect on me.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, going back to Chicago.
So you're at Chicago for how long? How long were you at Chicago?
I EOD'd in Chicago, I think April of 88, I believe. I got my dates correct. Okay. And I retired in 08.
Wow. So about 20 years in Chicago.
Yeah.
So you're in Chicago for 20 years. At some point, there's this decision to retire. How does that come about? What leads you to say, okay, now's the time? It's
part of it was professional. I mean, there's a couple of things I wanted to do, and they give you this, oh no, you're too valuable to, we can't, which is bullshit. I'm like, okay, and I wasn't one of the chosen few. So, okay. And then, the wife had some health issues, and thankfully, she's still here. I haven't killed her, but, she survived, she survived the medical crisis. And, so it was like, why am I killing myself? I could have, let's see, I was 53. So they kick us out at 57.
Okay.
If you're in a primary law enforcement position, you're mandated to retire at 57. You can get an extension for, if you've got like the case of the century, they'll give you an extension for a year or two, but 57, you're out. And I thought, why am I killing myself? This isn't sort of going okay. I could have hung around for 4 years and did absolutely nothing. They couldn't have done anything to me, but that's not me. I take pleasure in some respects that, and not in a conceited way, is anybody, they may not have been crazy about me, but no one, I stand by what other people say about me and my work ethic. So, that's kind of a personal thing for me. But no, wife, health issues. I started doing some figuring. I thought, I'm losing $5 a month for sitting on my butt at home doing nothing. I thought, it's time to go. So I put in my paperwork, and January 3rd, 08, I was gainfully unemployed.
So when you look back at your career, you mentioned your wife. Do you think the job had an impact on your home life?
To some degree. Part of what helped, though, is the wife had two brothers that were in law enforcement. So she was used to the routine. Her next youngest brother was a county sheriff. And so she was used to, not indirectly, I guess, was used to the routine, knew what it was all about, what the police thing, if you will, was all about. So she was kind of conditioned in that way. And, I was kind of good about, okay, we're going to be here. I'll call you as soon as I can. Don't worry. She was a trooper in that regard. She understood, partially from, her experience directly or indirectly with her brother. So it didn't have that much of an impact like you read sometimes about, oh my God, he's gone all the time. And it's, well, sunshine, this is what you signed up for.
Do you miss the job?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you miss about it?
Miss some of the people. And I'll admit, the adrenaline, you kind of become an adrenaline junkie. I miss, going through doors. I miss, I think, on the cliche part of it, but the reality of it is I miss some of the people. I miss the connection, the intimacy. It's kind of a messed up thing to say, but hanging out,
Yeah.
with the guys, intimacy is a bad thing. Not that kind of intimacy.
The closeness, right?
But no, miss the closeness and a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I think part is a good part of it. You kind of in your mind, you're, like you're doing something to better people.
Yeah.
If you will.
Do you
I miss.
Do you have any words of advice for someone that might be considering getting involved in law enforcement and maybe somebody that's considering ICE?
It's a good job. I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for the patrol. Only that the difference between the two groups, if you will, is I've found that through over the years, patrols, it was back then, I'm sure it pretty is now, a very tight-knit organization. I wonder about some of the people coming on now, but I'm sure the old timers back then said the same thing about us.
Sure.
These new guys are full of shit.
Yeah.
Man. We're fucked. They were a lot closer. Your supervisor might have hated you, but while you were working, you absolutely knew he had your back. Chicago's a little different. You're sort of, I don't want to MF Chicago and give it, it was a good bunch of people. We had some supervisors that were, still here, but collectively, it was watch your back. That you didn't have, patrol was a lot more clannish in that regard. Supervisor might have hated you, but when you were working, he had your back. It was the unwritten rule: you back your people up. You back your people up regardless. So, the difference.
So what are you doing now?
Now, I've done a few things since back in 12. I decided I was going to go to Afghanistan and help train the troops, and accepted. I was like, I went up in country and like, what the hell are you doing, Boris? But no, it was a very hard thing. Not so much just young, bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids, and you're kind of trying to mentor them. And, basically my thing was anything related to law enforcement, particularly border control issues, I was theoretically the subject matter expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking around as captains are 24, 25. To me, they look like babies. Mm-hmm. And this guy's like, he's in charge of 300 people. The colonel was 46, 47, and looked like 67. And, war weren't,
Mm-hmm.
things weren't, it wears people down. But it was a very hard thing to do. But I'm glad I did it. I was there for about 8 months. And it got a lot out of it. It was, personally, if you figure the amount of hours we put in, one of the things I told commander, I says, hey, what's your off day? He looked at me, he's like, hey, you're a funny guy. I like you. So 7 days a week. Sunday it was 8, 9 hours. You had a couple hours to, wash your clothes and get ready for the week. So, but stuff like that. And then lately, I've been, I told my wife, okay, no more adventures overseas. No more Afghanistan. I promise I'll stay home. Doing security work the last 4 or 5 years for a company, and good bunch of guys, retired cops. One of the guys, county guy, I think you interviewed him. Names will be kept secret.
I think you gave it away when you said I interviewed.
Okay, yeah. To protect the no. Mike's good people.
Yeah,
very good people. But no, just doing retail security.
Yeah.
Working the jewelry store for the past couple of years at different locations. But a good bunch of guys, get along very well, and just kind of trying to stay away from stay away from her, give her space, and vice versa, so we don't kill each other.
Yeah.
But I think we managed to survive 26 years, so I think we'll do all right.
Boris, I want to thank you for sitting down with me and sharing your story. It was very entertaining and insightful.
No, thanks for having me. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I kind of get off on these tangents and stuff, and kind of didn't babble too much. But no, absolute pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.